anyone who wants a dramatic change in their life has to go through something called the lonely chapters. I remember when my life changed forever, and there were other people in the room in this specific moment of my life, and they had no idea what was happening inside of me. But this memory is burned into my mind because nothing would ever be the same after this happened to me. So, what was it? 10 years ago or so, I was a pastor at a local church, and I had worked really hard to get that position. I had served in this local church while it was being planted for many years, about 4 years to be exact. And then I went to seminary. I got hired and went through a period of testing from the elders before I was an official pastor. And then, lo and behold, I finally got ordained. After all of that, one random staff meeting, my life changed in an instant. And what happened was something very simple that may not seem like a big deal to you. But essentially, I realized in that moment that the head pastor was not who I thought he was. And at that moment, he was my mentor. He was a big part of my life. And what led me to the realization that this was not the man I thought he was is that he was rude to me. And you may say, well, that's kind of anticlimactic, Mark. That's not a big deal. People are rude all the time. And I agree. And it wasn't this one specific act of rudeness that put the epiphany in my mind where I felt like God was speaking to me, saying, your time at this church is over. Your time in that pastorate is over. I'm sending you somewhere else. It wasn't this one moment of rudeness. Rather, it was in that moment of rudeness, the blinders were removed from my eyes and a flood of memories came into my mind where I saw all this evidence of this man not being who I thought he was. He was rude to other people, and I won't get into the details of all the sin that was eventually uncovered. I went through an investigation process, and the evidence was overwhelming that my instincts were correct about this person. I wasn't alone. There was a process that went through, and it ended terribly. It was not a happy ending. And so I don't bring all this up to stir up the past or to gossip about other people. I'm purposely avoiding specific details because that's not the point here. Rather, this led me into a lonely chapter of my life. And I had to leave that church. I had to leave that ministry. I had to leave the salary, the comfortability, the knowledge of knowing my church and where I was headed. I was told what to do and I did it, and I had to leave all that. It wasn't the first lonely chapter that I was headed into in life. I had been there before. I remember in high school, I was living sinfully, and I had grown up in a Christian household, and I wanted to go back to God. And I had friends around me that I loved and that seemed to love me, but they did not love God. And so I knew I had to make a choice. It's either leave this life and follow Christ, or abandon Christ and stay right where I'm at. And these lonely chapters are needed to transition into who God wants you to be. And so maybe you need a lonely chapter. Are you tired of those relationships that start out so strong, but then always seem to end in tears? Or maybe you keep going back to that specific person and you say, we're never going to sleep again, we're finally going to do it differently, but you keep going back and you keep falling to that same sexual sin. Or maybe you are tired of your position at work and you want something better, but it just never seems to happen. You feel unfulfilled in life. Oftentimes, what you want is on the other side of the chasm, That's the lonely chapters in between.